Welcome back, listeners, to episode 3 of Beyond Hockey. On today's episode, we have Zeke Newman. Zeke is an FIH accredited umpire who's done 29 international matches to date. Zeke, on this episode, is going to discuss his rapid rise from an under-15s national championships to his first international match, all within a 12-month period. He'll also discuss the challenges of having to quickly form a relationship with fellow umpires and other officials when on tour, some who don't even speak the same language. He'll also discuss the training that he endures and has to keep up with to remain at his peak level of fitness, the mental health and how important it is for not only officials but everyone else to have a support network around them to help them through their tough periods of life. I personally found this episode very interesting and eye-opening to see what it's like for an official and an international umpire and the challenges that they have to face. I hope you enjoy this episode. Please welcome Zeke Newman.
Zeke, good evening all listeners and welcome to the third episode of Beyond Hockey. Please welcome Zeke. Zeke, mate, thanks for getting up your time tonight on this lovely Tuesday evening.
No worries, Jimmy.
Mate, I'm going to start with a few quick fire questions for you. Best player to umpire and why?
I've been lucky enough, probably umpired a fair few famous players, your Jamie Dwyers or your Kookaburras. Your best players to umpire are always the ones that kind of want to work with you, I find. Not all of them every time want to, but yes, any of those Kookaburras are pretty good. Some of the internationals, particularly the Europeans, are quite good at it. Probably the best player to umpire, purely on connection, would be maybe the Indian captain at the moment, Manpreet. He's always pretty good, always pretty respectful towards the umpires and always gets his point across without being too over the top. Yeah, maybe him.
Beautiful. The best umpire that you've actually officiated with, or an official for that matter. Doesn't have to be an umpire, but the best kind of fellow colleague.
Yeah, on my first international experience tour to Europe, our first stop was Germany. With pretty exciting time for someone who had just started in international officiating. I think it was my second match. I umpired with his brother the first night, and then the second night he turned up and we did a club match in his home city, Australia under 21s versus Germany. So it was really good.
What was his name again, sorry?
Christian Blasch.
Yeah, okay.
German, yeah. Big,
nice.
Tall fella.
Yeah, nice. And the best umpire coach you've had, or I guess influence on umpiring, I guess?
Well, being from New South Wales, obviously growing up through the ranks, Dave Gentles, who was a really important figure in my career going through coach. I've also internationally had the pleasure, one of the guys that he did the Olympic final with in 2012, Jed Curran, was someone who I've had a couple of times at international tournaments that I'd probably say has been someone who's really shared his experiences in a way that's really helped my umpiring.
Very good. Some big names there, by the way. Now, this is one of my personal favourites. The best spray you've ever received from either a coach or a player. I know it's not the funnest job sometimes, but...
Yeah, best spray. There's always some good ones.
Happy to name to shame, I reckon, too. Happy to name and shame.
Name and shame. I won't name any players that might be getting around at the moment. Players aren't necessarily... I don't reckon the players give the best sprays. I think the coaches give the best sprays. And because I've had my fair share of run-ins with a couple of coaches. One in particular that probably stands out was the Japanese coach at the current time is a Dutch fella, and he is very loud on the bench. So I remember coming off a match that I had the Japanese boys, and he was just firing on all cylinders, following us off the pitch, having a spray at both of us. In the same form, another Dutch coach was coaching India when they came to AHL, the under-21s team, Roland Altman. So there's another famous name that's given me a fair spray after they lost the game in shootout one year at AHL over in Perth. So that was fun.
They always find ways to blame the umpires, don't they?
Pretty easy targets.
Easy done, mate. And finally, a little quick fire question. Favourite hockey moment up to this date?
Hockey moment. Probably as a tournament, the Junior World Cup that I went to in 2016. That was probably one of the biggest hockey tournaments that I've been involved in, and just the kind of the whole get around of that. So yeah, that's probably one of the best hockey moments for me. Yeah.
Sound like a good experience. I'm going to move on now to a bit of the childhood. So born in Mudgee, you moved to the Central Coast when you were quite young. How did you find your way into hockey, I guess, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, hockey. Dad was a PE teacher, so he started playing hockey back in Tamworth when he was teaching to start with up in Coonabarabran and the surrounding areas of Tamworth. So he played hockey and then played in Mudgee. Obviously, I didn't really follow on, pretty young in Mudgee, but when we moved to the Central Coast, he started playing. Probably was about 11, 12 when I started playing and got into it that way. And yeah, just played for the local club, played a few age groups and that, and then just moved through the rep system that way.
And that was kind of the next question. How did the umpiring come about? Did you start while you were playing, or did you kind of stop playing throughout those younger age and get into it, or was it kind of coincidence?
Yeah, I started playing rep hockey and hanging around hockey, and that was pretty much my Saturday. And it was I suppose a way to do something while I was hanging around a hockey field. I'd play or I'd be around, and I'd always found an interest in officiating when I was there. So started on a Saturday morning, hanging around, waiting for someone not to turn up and grab a game here and there. And then it just grew from there. So from the grass field at Wyong was I think it was an under nines game or something one Saturday morning. And then I would just fit in as many as I could before I went home or had to play. And just, if I was at hockey, it was kind of hand in hand.
It's a little bit what the hockey community does, isn't it? They don't like going home during the day. It's usually a 9 a.m. to kind of 6 p.m. kind of day on those Saturdays and Sundays. So looking for things to do.
It's the beauty of only having one set of fields is that you're always there. You don't have to go anywhere else. So particularly if multiple people are playing that you want to watch or there's games on, it's an easy way to kill time.
Yeah, the odd one-stop shop. Mate, so your first
That's
rep,
right.
I guess, honour for umpiring, York Cup 2004.
Yep.
I guess what age and how was that experience? So how old were you when you first did that? And I guess how did you find that being your kind of first major little tournament, I guess?
Yeah, York Cup 2004 was a very different York Cup to what it looks like now. I think we had 8 teams and it was a Sunday only comp. And so the under 11 Central Coast team needed an umpire to take away. And I was, 2004, I was 13. So it was not too far removed from my own age group, but loved it. And I think that's probably the thing I love most about hockey officiating is that carnival experience. So getting in and doing games that are meaningful to everyone, but then you get a carnival is something you can get instant reward or feedback from in your performance. So that probably drove it a little bit more in the way in which I wanted to continue to move through that rep kind of umpiring ranks, I suppose. And not that I can fully remember, but I think would have done 4 or 5 games in one day, back to back kind of stuff, back at that younger level. So yeah, it was obviously a good experience for me, but I think it's something that it's different to your week in, week out umpiring. So it's a new experience and it's one I really enjoy still.
I was going to say that it's something that the listeners might not know. Like we were there at the York Cup actually last year together, and you're still giving back. You're still kind of helping out in those younger age groups and helping out the officials, which is always good to see. It's at least 16 years on, and you're still helping out, which is excellent to see. So from that experience, you got from 2004 there. I guess in the next big step, you've gone through all the age groups of nationals around Australia, did all the national championships through Hockey Australia and that. Was there a particular moment from then, I guess, to your first international experience where you said, this is what you want to do, this is something that you want to pursue and you want to try and get to the highest level possible?
Yeah, I always wanted to do that. I was kind of, it took a long time. Like I went through, it would have been 2008, 2009 kind of open state championships. Moved pretty quickly through to the A division kind of area, top of that kind of level. And then at that stage, Hockey Australia were pretty mandatory on having to be 18 to go to an under 13s or an under 15s panel. So I kind of missed out for a few years purely based on just your date of birth. And then 2010, and that was probably my first outdoor nationals. And then in 2012 was the next time I went back, and I went to an under 15s, and that was in October, and it was in Adelaide, which was lucky enough. And at the time, Tim Pullman, who is an Olympian as an umpire, was running the Hockey Australia kind of officiating scene in his hometown. A couple of us had performed really well. And in October, we were at under 15s. By that next April, we were in Brisbane at an under 21s nationals. And that was probably the real kickstart to my international career. And then by that July 2013, I was in Europe on the under 21s tour.
Fair little 12 months for you.
In Germany, Belgium, and yeah. And then by the full 12 months, that was my international debut in New Zealand. So the October to October, that's probably when it really kick-started me on that road to, you know what, I can be at an international level, even though it had been a dream, and I'd always thought I'd love it by a certain time in my life, and it was probably kick-started probably 5-10 years earlier than I was really expecting it to. So while it was awesome, it was such a fast trip.
So you basically went from 12 months from doing an under 15s nationals to your first international game in 12 months.
Yeah. So October 2012, I was in doing under 15s, and then October 2013, New Zealand.
So who was your first international match over there in New Zealand? Who'd you umpire?
Australia, which is an oddity. It was an Australia v Samoa, and it was
I've got this
just
here,
as the title suggests.
I've got the stats.
Yeah.
I was going to say you're by the sounds of your arms have been cramping a bit from awarding a few goals. 32-0 was the score?
I had them in the 32-0, and I had Australia in the first half. So the first 35 minutes were straight at me, but obviously it went a bit the other end in the second half. But I think I gave 18 or 16 goals or something in the first half, and I'd have to look back, but I think I gave a couple of cards as well. So it was a welcome to international hockey. 16 goals. I think I did 2 games there that week that were over 25. So the beauty, and while you think, they're pretty easy, Samoa and those guys don't play the hockey you would normally see. So it was a different experience there again.
I bet it would have been, Jesus Christ. So how did you find it? I guess your first kind of, as you said, you're sitting there. Did you think about, like, 12 months earlier, I was at Adelaide doing under 15s nationals, and here I am doing my first international game. How did you cope with that? I guess, would your fellow kind of officials there actually have a chat with them a bit and get a bit of support from them, or how was it?
Yeah, it's probably nice that I was as young as I was and a little bit naive, to be honest. I think if you put me in the situation now where it was the same at 2013, at 22, I probably wasn't thinking about it. I was probably like, well, I'm in another country for a hockey tournament and I'm umpiring. Like, that was really the be all and end all of it. But when you think back of it, you think, oh, and I think when people ask about pathways and things in umpiring, everyone takes such a different pathway. Like, my pathway early on was very follow the steps, do the right things. At you're under 15 state champs, you get to go to 18s, you get to go to opens, that kind of stuff. But that international stuff happens so quickly, and no, there's a lot of umpires around the country that can say they've been to an under 18 national championships. I never have. So it's just a weird part of my career that went so quickly.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I guess that's a good thing about you now. You're involved in that pathway, I guess, from a Hockey New South Wales and a Hockey Australia point of view, which is great. You're giving back, and I guess you've had that experience yourself, which is always a good thing. Now, you've got 29 international field matches to date, I believe, is what my statistics show. What's next on your calendar? Is there anything upcoming? I guess with this COVID period now, there's not a lot, but what's the next goal for you?
Yeah, the COVID period has kind of thrown a spanner in the works with hockey in general, from our state champs through to the national calendar. What are we, the start of September? So we'd be pretty much bang into Hockey One season right now, which is something we won't have this year. So that would have been a big part of my next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I suppose, like it was last year. Internationally, it's one of those things that we never really know. We're on a list, we're part of a panel that can be appointed to certain tournaments, but it might be 6 months, it could be 12 months, 18 months, 2 years before you get a tournament. So it's just kind of using the opportunity when it arises. So you might get 2 weeks notice, you might get 12 months notice, depending on what the tournament is and when they can appoint it. So not knowing the calendar internationally at the moment, I haven't really put my sights on hopefully being appointed somewhere. But in saying that, if something pops up, you've got to be ready to go. So it's just continual work at your local comps. So back in Sydney doing that, and when I get the chance to go to a state champs, I always jump at the chance to make sure I've got some tournament experience before I go to a national or an international event.
How do you find that new Hockey One league? You mentioned at the start, last year being the first league, and I guess a more week in, week out at that high level. How did you find that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the travel part, like the component of you go and do a job, you come out. And I think that's an experience that we don't have as hockey players or officials at all, really. We're so used to I go in for 2 weeks and Hockey Australia fly me in as an official 2 days early, and I might have one game a day and I get all day to prepare. And it's just a different atmosphere where if we look at the Pro League, you don't get that. Like the guys are flying in Friday night from maybe Asia to Australia, umpiring Saturday, Sunday, going home Sunday night. And we need to be able to do one game and make it our best game yet. I think that's the change that we as officials have had to embrace. And I think the Hockey One League being the way it has made that able for us to do before we get to that international level. So I think I really enjoy it. I found last year was good. I got the chance to go do the semi in Queensland, which was really nice. But even the home game, just the atmosphere of a game that's just a round game in the scheme of the competition is still getting 1,000+ people at every venue. So instead of having a midweek game because you've got to play every day at a national championships, I think that part of it was really good.
No, it sounded like a good experience, and as you said, that fly in, fly out kind of attitude and getting that experience is what I guess not only officials but players as well. They're not used to it in Australia, especially being that I guess semi-professional level at the moment, which is hopefully something that gets used to. Now, The next part I want to talk to you about is I guess the requirements of being a high-level umpire. I guess a lot of people understand being a high-level athlete, they've got the fitness and all that, but people forget that umpires have to go through pretty similar things. So what I guess requirements and fitness testing, conditioning do you have to do to maintain that? Is there any requirements from Hockey Australia or an international panel point of view?
Yeah, so both of those have different requirements. Hockey Australia are pretty much following the international one. So internationally, we have set tests. So we do a yo-yo test at set standards throughout the year, and we normally do them at tournaments too. So the yo-yo scores are pretty high. The Pro League and the panel just under the Pro Leagues at, we talk in meters, but it's an equivalent of about a level 20.5, between 20 and 21 in the levels of that. And that really is the main test we use. But there's the sprinting component. I'm at the moment really training is normally, as unlike players, we can't go to club training week in, week out. We don't have a set session where we go and do umpire training. So it's really off your own back. And a lot of people don't see that, I suppose, from umpires. So I personally, I am out running, or if it's in the gym. COVID obviously changed that a little bit, so I quite got into a bit of road running, which I've been doing over the last few months. So that's been quite fun. A lot of the boys around Australia kind of more into that long distance running, which is where most of our cardio comes from. But yeah, so it's that stuff away. It's not as easy as go to club training, do your stick work, do your running before, do your pre-season work. That it'd be awesome if we did. I'd love to have a group of 15 of us that went and trained every week, but where that fits and where we hold that is a different story. So it is good fun.
Well, that was what I was kind of going to get at next, is that I guess the hockey community doesn't understand that. They just think, sometimes umpires just turn up, that they do a game and they head home, but the actual work that goes into it, it's similar to players. It's not like it's unusual. They've got to stay fit. They've got to be on top of their game, because at the end of the day, you're the one that's coughing, as you said, that spray if a team loses. And if you're not at that end to make a right decision, at the end of the day, that falls on you guys sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. And it's all about, a lot of the fitness stuff's led from that decision making at the end of the game. So if you're not in the right spot, or you're too worried about breathing because you can't keep up, your decision making goes out the window. So your ability to have a heart rate a bit lower and be in a position earlier to be in the right position is super crucial between those guys that are progressing around the world, and maybe what's holding some people back. So I always think if we can get fitter, the fitter we get, whenever there's always going to be different things that you change, or your speed, or like, there's no way in the world I'm catching Kurt Lovett or a Tom Craig, but if I can be at least smart enough to get running before he does, I need that 15 meters head start before he catches me. So as close as I can get to him, the better.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I guess a lot of players can get criticised for, as you said, that decision making late in games under fatigue. I guess that's what a lot of rugby league, especially now, is coming into with this new rule change. And it's the same with the hockey. It's gone into quarters now, so it's just that high speed intensity rather than halves. How have you found that, the change into quarters rather than halves?
Yeah, I think the quarters not only change the intensity because the players are able to run for longer. I also think you've got the better players on the field for longer, so your hockey is better. So you've obviously got your top players they've already got 3 breaks built into the game. So a lot of the time in the big games, they're not coming off. So you're getting longer periods of your top 11 v 11, whereas maybe in a 35-minute half, you've got to give those players rest to keep them from fatiguing. I also think there's a bit of scoreboard pressure involved in the officiating of quarters too, where you look up and it's got 32 minutes. You're kind of not in that position where, oh my God, any decision I make now could affect this result. But even in the first quarter, you look up and it's got 5 minutes on the clock. It's a different mindset. So I think that's been the biggest change personally, is that, okay, I look up and I've got to do it 4 times. So I look up, check my watch or whatever it might be, and it says 5 minutes. So you're like, oh, last 5 minutes, you kind of get in a different zone. Your heart rate might go up, or you might get a little bit more edgy around, where do I need to be? What do I need to do? So if you can harness that, it makes your decision making better. But sometimes it can do the opposite as well, where you're a bit nervous about, well, the decisions I make might actually really involve this.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a good change, and I guess a lot of people are on board with that. On your preparation, I'd love to know a bit. Tell us a bit about, what do you do to prepare for a game? Do you change it from game to game, or you try and be quite consistent with your preparation and what you do before a game?
Yeah, I pretty much similar. I don't think I would change it. Maybe you might change what you might do in the fact of where you are or what you can do. But I normally like to follow a pretty standard routine. Just chill out most of the time before a game, depending on if I'm at a tournament and we're there the day before, or I'm going into a game and we're arrived the morning before. It's normally pretty cruisy. If it's a regular round game, I might go for a walk in the morning, or just kill a bit of time, bit of energy beforehand. But then normally probably a couple of hours early, just start getting in that game prep, making sure, like, I'm pretty big on making sure everything's in my bag, making sure I've got everything. correct colours, all that kind of stuff, shoes, and then getting into the change room and kind of getting yourself prepared. And then once you walk out of that room, then it's kind of into the mood of quick warm up, get yourself ready, make sure you, I suppose now with our radios, making sure we've got communications set up. And then depending on the different matches, it might be that you're waiting for the TV guys, or you're waiting for the TOs and the tournament officials to make sure their end's set, and then on we go. And then after that first whistle, it's kind of in the autopilot of, yep, we're back on a hockey field. So no superstitious stuff in that way around preparing for a match. But yeah, more just the super check your bag 4 times, or then don't never want to turn up without this, or that kind of stuff.
I was going to say that would be the issue, wouldn't it? That would be the real confusing, the old no whistle, no cards, and you're scrambling, and next minute the heart rate's flying before you go on the field.
Yeah, scrambling to borrow someone's cards or socks, or even worse, shoes. Yeah, it's not good.
No, it wouldn't be. Now, I'll move on to a bit of a different topic now. Got a couple of children now. You got Emerson and Amelia, I believe, about 3 and a few months old is Amelia. So congratulations, firstly.
Thanks, mate.
How's that, I guess, impacted you in the fact of your umpiring for one, but also your mindset on life? I hear a couple of sports people talk about, and it puts things into perspective. You know, it's not that, the game's not the end of the world now. People used to play and get upset over a game, and now they relax. You know, Dave Warner's a good one in cricket.
Yeah.
As a child, and he comes out and scores runs for fun. He just says that perspective on life now is different. Has that impacted you?
Yeah, I'm really lucky with my wife, Jess. Like, we got married in 2014. 2 weeks later, I shipped off to a hockey tournament for 2 weeks. Amelia was born, obviously, during the COVID restrictions, so I didn't have any time to go to a hockey tournament. But Emerson was born February 2017, and I was in Bangladesh for the last 2 weeks of February in 2017. I think it was 3 days or 4 days before I left a brand new mum and a crying baby and went for 2 weeks overseas by myself. So I'm really lucky in the fact that Jess and the girls now support hockey. It's just that grounding of, you know what, whatever happens at a hockey field, no matter what spray I get or what I think of the game or that kind of stuff, it does bring it back. When I walk in the door, I'm just dad. Like, at 3 years old, Emerson knows I go to hockey. She knows that I blow a whistle. She loves blowing a whistle on the sideline and doing it at home too, which is really cool. I do compete with her uncle that probably is a bit cooler than I am on a hockey field at the moment. So, but we'll get there. And and I'm just able to pursue what I want to pursue, whether it be in my career with my games or helping out at those other levels. Just the commitment from Jess and her commitment to our family to allow me to do that is really good. And that's probably frees me up to then go, and when I'm at hockey, even though I know that when I get home, I'm back to being dad, it means that I can fully concentrate on that. I'm not worried about how they're doing or who's looking after them, because I know they're in really good hands.
That was kind of leading into my next part is, I guess, it sounds like you've got a really great support network around you there. And the next part, I guess, is the mental health side of it. It might sound silly, but obviously being an umpire, you people aren't the most friendly to you on the field, especially. But I guess, how do you deal with that? I guess, is there a lot of mental health support out there for the officials, I guess, on and off the field? Is, after a game finishes, as you said, that Japanese coach following you down the sheds and giving it to you.
Yeah.
It doesn't end. It really doesn't end. So how do you deal with it? And I guess, is there a lot of support for you guys out there?
Yeah, and there's a couple of really horror stories. Thankfully, hockey, we don't have too many. But just I suppose it's that perspective on what it is. Is it a match? Like, it's just in the end, it's a hockey match. And the same we say with players who make mistakes. No umpire. I always say, whenever I'm talking to younger umpires, if you have a perfect game, give it up. You're never going to do it again. And not everyone's going to think you're perfect, because ultimately one team's going to be more upset with you than the other. I think the main mental health for umpires is really in that kind of fraternity of fellow umpires. And some of us, like, I'm really lucky that I have a support network that all understand hockey. Jess, obviously, family's been involved with hockey her entire life, so I can get on the phone on the way home and rant to my heart's content, and she understands it. And I think that's a really important part for me, is that while she's at home looking after Emerson and Amelia or doing her own thing, she knows that she understands what's involved in hockey and what kind of the parameters of what I do are. So that's really good. And even just that support of in the first couple of years of me umpiring, like mum and dad take me around hockey fields. When you can't drive and you want to go and umpire somewhere, you've got to have someone who gives you a lift. And that's kind of that mental health as well, because you can debrief in the car or you can do that kind of stuff. But as umpires, I think we've got to help each other a little bit as well, where we don't necessarily always have an umpire coach or that. So debriefing with your co-umpire after it, or finding those mentors around clubs that can just give you that little bit of insightful advice around what went wrong, or, hey, this happened in my game, what would you do? Or what should I have done? Or could I have done anything different? And most of the time people will go, yeah, you could have done this, or you know what? No, I would have done the same, or whatever it could be. So I think that's the mental health side. But it's all too common that you hear that umpires have given it up because they have had those sprays and they haven't really had the support straight away, or they've thought, well, why am I doing this? I can go and work at Macca's, or I can go and spend my Saturday afternoons with my mates instead of being at a hockey field giving back. And I think that's a culture change as well, which we're doing. We're getting there, but it's not always going to be the same for everyone.
Exactly right. And that's what, again, another point I was going to get to is obviously the Respect for Officials campaign that kind of got launched a few years ago, and getting players to take pledges. I know at Hockey New South Wales at our regional challenge, we had a stand there to players to come sign up. And it's just that it's raising a bit of awareness. It's it sounds bad, but people don't think umpires are humans. Umpires actually, they feel what you say, and people they say some quite nasty things. So raising that awareness and I guess encouraging people to actually be friendly and it's just a game. At the end of the day, it's just a game.
And I think that's definitely starting to change around the state and the country in the way in which people talk to officials and just talk about the games. And it's about the game and the decision, not necessarily always about the person. I don't think, like, as much as you might disagree with an umpire on the park, a lot of, like, there wouldn't be a hockey field I couldn't go to that I wouldn't be able to have a good in-depth chat with most of the people that are playing, which is a really nice touch. And that's that kind of, those respectful relationships you build, and that helps when it comes to being on the field. But if I go back to starting my career, maybe that was the hardest part of what you had to do to get those kind of relationships, and you earn them through doing a good job, I suppose, and working with people and having an attitude where you want to learn and you might not always get them right, but if you can get more right than you get wrong, or not get the same one wrong all the time, people respect that. And even saying, you know what, that was wrong, is something that I think players and officials in particular don't normally like to do, but it does sometimes say to the player, yeah, you know what, he's understood or she's understood what I'm saying. Nothing's going to change what happened, but I can go back and say, you know what, yeah, I could have done something different.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, to be honest, one of the more embarrassing times of my life was actually a cricket official. I was really good mates, and he took me out for dinner, a couple of months before the season started, and we had him during the game. And again, a couple of decisions, and he's a top level umpire. He's not and again, I just lost my cool a little bit, and I caught one of the biggest sprays from him after the game. I didn't report it, but got sat in the shed and just opened my eyes. I was just, you think when you're on the park that things off the field, like, you walk off and it's all done. It's not. So if you like, those things carry off, and no doubt he's lost a little bit of respect for me for sure. And that kind of hurts a bit. You think about it and you go, actually, that it was just a game. Why did I say things like that? And why was I so silly? It makes a difference. Which it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. But going on that mental health and I guess support network, does it differ from tournament to tournament? In the fact, if you go over to Bangladesh or India, is there a big crew that go with you? How many umpires usually go to a tournament like that?
Yeah, so depending on team numbers, so like if let's say there's 8 teams, you might have 10 to 12 umpires. You've then got your off-field officials as well. So you might have a couple of umpire managers, couple of like your judges, your TOs. There's obviously going to be a tournament director who's in charge of the whole show. And then depending on the level of tournament, a lot of the time FIH will send a representative as well. So someone who works for them, does all their kind of back end stuff, make sure things are running smoothly. So you might end up with, maybe closer to 18, 20 people. And yeah, if you're in a country like India or Bangladesh, a group of white Caucasians walking around, you don't get around without people noticing you. And you're pretty out of the blue to, particularly someone like myself who's a bit taller, stands over a big crowd, it becomes quite a spectacle for a lot of locals to come and see you. So you do get to know those people really quickly. So that's a really good support network in that fact. Some of them, and the thing, I suppose the opposite to that at a tournament like that is you don't know those people. You might have met one or two of them. Depending on when you get in, you might get in and share a room. Well, I was in Bangladesh and I was sharing a room with the Chinese umpire whose words he could say in English I could count on 2 hands. But I walk in at 10:30 at night because that's when the flight connects and he's dead asleep in the bed, and you just think, oh, what am I going to do here? I don't want to be my first experience of meeting this guy to be me tripping over something and smashing into a bed. So it's that kind of stuff around meeting different people and getting to know different people that kind of, when you're off the field, it takes you away from the rigmarole of maybe you've had a bad game or maybe you've done something that you would have wanted to change. Whereas if you didn't have that close knit where everyone's kind of relying on each other for their social network for those 12 days or 10 days or whatever it might be, that I think would change. And I think that's a really cool part of being an official, where we're not just traveling with a team that we know. Like, we don't get to travel with the same guys all the time. And some of the officials you travel with the least are the Australians. So it's definitely a cool little thing.
Well, that was going to be my next point, I guess, about if the teams you travel away, usually say Kookaburras, Hockeyroo, for instance, they train, some of them live together, and they go away on tournaments, and they see each other for 250 days out of the year. Where, as you said, you go away, you've met someone sometimes you haven't met them, as you said, your roommate, and you just turn up, and next minute you're with them for 10 days, and you got to lean on them a bit. You can't speak English. That's the things that I think, for me, that's why I wanted to do the podcast, is to get those things out there. It's not as simple as people sound, and some great experiences for officials out there. So, mate, I love you telling us that stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. A few random questions to kind of close it out a little bit now. The number one rule, you may have been asked these a few times, been coming in the office, but the number one rule is no fence sitting. Okay, so you've got to pick a side.
Got it.
First one I got, peanut butter, smooth or crunchy?
Crunchy. Not that I eat much, but crunchy would have to be my choice.
Good. Barbecue tomato sauce, do you put it in the fridge or the cupboard?
Cupboard.
Cupboard, straight up, good, straight answer. Kate Jenner was an interesting one last episode. She has one in the fridge and one in the cupboard for both. I thought
interesting.
That was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah. Orange juice, pulp, no pulp?
No pulp.
Straight up, good choice. Kurt Lovett loves some pulp, loves the freshly squeezed.
Chewing the orange juice is not a good choice.
Oh, I agree. It's a drink, not a meal.
Yeah, that's right.
Chocolate, fridge or cupboard?
Fridge.
Yep. All chocolate, like Tim Tams, everything fridge?
Yeah. Yep. Biscuits or even just blocks. Yeah.
Yep.
Fridge.
Good. I like it, straight up. One of the better answers we've given. Now, the final question I like to ask every guest is, who's the most famous person you know that would come up and greet you by your name? So basically, they know you, you know them, you're quite close. The most famous person.
Oh, greet me by name.
Name, nickname, doesn't have to be obviously Zeke. Hi, Zeke Newman.
Yeah. In the hockey community, I suppose it'd be, I know most of the Kookaburras in particular, so I'd probably have to go with any of them, would be the most famous. Who's the most famous that would know my name? Maybe Matt Wells or one of the Queensland boys that are, maybe a Liam DeYoung or something like that. So let's go with those guys. Not that I know anyone super famous outside of hockey, unfortunately. So
No, that's all right. Not many of us do, to be honest. But
Yeah, I suppose a hockey podcast, those names mean something. Whereas if I said them at work, no one would care.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I think at the moment, Kate Jenner's probably got the lead. Went to school with Josh Hazelwood, so she's probably got the nod.
Oh, that's a good one.
On a few.
Yeah.
She didn't think he was famous. I asked, and she couldn't answer. And I was like, "Didn't you go to school with one of the most famous people at the moment?" She's like,
I'd say Josh Hazelwood takes the cake there on the most famous.
I would have thought so, but that was up to Kate anyway. But Zeke, mate, been an absolute pleasure having you on. Really appreciate your insights into the officiating and umpiring world, and I love seeing you give back to the game as well at the moment, which is something that I'm all about. So, mate, really appreciate giving up your Tuesday night.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for having me, and then hopefully any stories about officials are always welcome, I think. So it's nice to have a little bit of coverage, and hopefully it gets out there and encourages a few more to pick up a whistle and have a go.
Super job, mate. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.